Welcome to an episode of Chat Sports Talk. And once again, we're doing a college realignment video. Yeah, I know. I do quite a lot of these. I think I regurgitate quite a few things here and there with a little bit tweaks. But this is kind of like a response from a video I saw probably a month ago so far. And a known SEC proponent who also kind of redid this video for his perfect setup. And I've looked at this, and plus you throw in the fact that Sacramento State, North Dakota State football programs are now in the FBS. And the landscape for college football is increasingly growing in size, the dynamics, and conferences are making less and less sense. Big Ten going from coast to coast. The MAC is now coast to coast. Big 14 going from the Rockies to the Appalachians. SEC pretty much within their footprint. ACC's coast to coast. The American, pretty much a huge swath of the American landscape. And it's gone away from the identity that the conferences originally had when college athletics first launched. More regionalized, regional biases, regional hatred, and just developed from there. The same scenario I'm going to kind of take on is if I was in charge of the FBS Division I, what would I do? And this is how I go look at it. This is just a alternate universe, Earth 3999. Depending on which, Marvel or DC universe you want to use. And this is how I'm going to delve into what I would like to see college football at. Now, there's a few things that I will try to tackle first before I get to realignment, and some of these items will be kind of controversial in nature. So I'll just start those off right now and forewarn you. One is to deal with the transfer portal. It has become more and more like free agency, and that's not what college football is for. I understand student athletes sometimes find themselves in a situation where they're recruited to a program, but then the head coach leaves and they're stuck there going with a new head coach that doesn't want them there because he didn't recruit them, gets his own guys in there to replace you, and now you're on the bench holding the game plans. So I understand those kind of aspects. I understand there might be personal situations where it requires you to go to a different location because maybe, your child needs more medical attention at a specific area that's not offered where you're at. Or your parents or siblings need a little extra care and it's better suited to go to a different location. So there's nuances out there that I do get. And where it comes to transfer portal, I want to go, you have one free pass. No questions asked. You can go to any school and automatically jump right back into the swing of things. Now, if you've already gone through that one pass, but you want to do a transfer again, you must apply for exemption. Exemption is either a line coach, a coordinator, or a head coach leaves that program to go somewhere else, and you feel personally connected with that individual. Do that. Once again, family situations can do that. If you were injured all last season, and didn't really get to play, but you have a feeling you don't have the opportunity at the current program because they've already moved on for you, there you go. I mean, that should allow the talents to be recruited, cultivated by the programs themselves, like college football used to be. The second major thing I would tackle, NIL. Now, for me, I've always stated that the football players should always get paid because universities make millions off these kids' backs. Millions. It is almost considering slave trade, but yet every time I brought it up before NIL became a thing. People always push back when they get scholarships. I'm like, not everyone. Only a select few get scholarships. And scholarships don't cover everything anyways. They're just there for, your education. They cover, your classes and your books. Sometimes you get meals. Sometimes you get board or room and board. So, but these universities have these multi-billion-dollar television contracts now. Huge payouts from bowl games. Ticket sales, merchandise sales, game revenue from, online games and video console games. Student athlete gets none of that. Now they're starting to get paid, but unfortunately now the system is so loose that, anything goes, and it's come to the format of what the Southwest Conference, was once at, in the 80s, and the death sentence that SMU got from all recruitment violations. And yet there's still recruitment violations, but yet there's always chest of money for NIL that just also magically appeared from boosters and alumni to attract players. So it's like the school is somewhat willing to pay, but not really. But the alumni are kind of, there's kind of like this shady area, much like some of the dark money in politics, to attract these players and this talent and get these programs to shoot them up the ladder and hopefully win a national championship. Sometimes it doesn't pay out. I mean, you look at the Yankees. They spend a lot of money, but haven't really got a lot of titles recently. A&M's been a big spender and hasn't really done much with that. But there needs to be a cap on this. This is no longer a process where the boosters, the alumni, the school, whatnot, gets together, generates all this money to attract players. It should come down to percentage cuts the players get automatically, i.e., anytime their name, image, or likeness is utilized in any type of merchandise, i.e., any jersey sales, t-shirt sales, games where their name and personal image are on there, they get a percentage of that. Ticket sales, they get a percentage of that. Television revenue, they get a percentage of that. Bowl winnings, they get a percentage of that. That way, every player has a base core where they're getting funds from. Now, those that develop sponsorship programs and contracts, for local businesses, for the school, or national, that's their money. They earn that. And I think that's what you really need to kind of do, pump the brakes and look. I understand that college football generates the almost like 80% of the athletic budget for all athletic programs sponsored by the university. Quite not 80%, but it is the vast majority of athletic budget is generated from the football program. But there's so much extra money, and these coaches, huge amount of paydays. The administrative staff, huge amount of paydays. But, if you try to go to the big name programs and you try to get into one of their stadiums, you're talking about $100 just for nosebleed seats, almost. And so there's got to be a balance with that, where student athlete still gets the money that they should earn. Scholarships are still available to offset the cost of college. And the school still gets quality players to play for their schools, to generate, the winning seasons, which means more money, in the students' pockets. It's just how this vicious cycle kind of goes. But that's just my take. I'm like, bare-boned NIL. But, that's just, my aspect of that. Go to part 3, the new conference layout. Like I said, conferences right now make no sense. Coast to coast, losing their identity, rivalries getting broken up so they can find, go over the fence to find greener grass. And a lot of times it's not greener. It's artificially colored, or it's just artificial turf. So I want to go back to a simpler time frame where a lot of these conferences are shrunk back down to a reasonable size to generate a competitive balance in between the conference as best as possible within a regional aspect. Note, there will be a few conferences where there are some programs that don't make sense in here. But I've looked at what's considered the power conferences and the group, separate them accordingly, generate 5 conferences per section. Now for the power, I put 2 of them back in there, and that's Washington State, Oregon State. Somehow when the Pac-12 got demolished, they got left out, holding the bag in the cold and in the rain because they're in the Northwest. So we get a little bit of both. So I looked at them like, no, we'll put them back in because they're the most recent ones to get demoted from the power to the group, while other group members get moved up to the power. So kind of regenerate that. So all the ones I consider power are in the power conference, also in the group, that includes the new members, Sacramento State, North Dakota State. So without further ado, let's go with, I think, probably the easiest one, the Big Ten. Now note, this is just me sitting here randomly thinking up these things and generate these conferences. And most of these are, you'll see, very similar through various other videos that I do in terms of college realignment. And a lot of this, I think, because it makes sense. A lot of them have an old school feel to them. I grew up a lot of how some of these conferences are set up. And I figured that's the best way to go back to that situation. And like the Big Ten, one of the oldest conferences in the nation, go back to that core of those. I even go with 11 when they had Penn State. Bring that core back. Also bring in Notre Dame. I'm an Irish fan. I have always stated Notre Dame belongs in the Big Ten. Notre Dame is in Big Ten country. They've had standing rivalries with Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, and Northwestern for decades. Then I also add Pittsburgh and Syracuse. Syracuse, at one point in time, I do believe was in the conversation to get into the Big Ten, and they just kind of decided not to go with it. But also adding Pittsburgh, Syracuse keeps Penn State happy because they were trying to generate a conference with those two, a bunch of others, to form a new Eastern Conference. But when Pitt and Syracuse joined the Big East, Penn State and joined the Big Ten. So it kind of culminates into that. Of course, Penn State, Pitt have a history. Notre Dame, Pitt has a history. Notre Dame, Syracuse have a history. Notre Dame, Penn State. I mean, there's a lot of, interlocking rivalries going on here, and I think it makes perfect sense for all of them to join. Now we'll head to the SEC, the other behemoth in the room. And go with the SEC, go back to the quarter when they went to 12. When the SEC expands, they don't really tend to stretch their footprint too much. They just kind of stretch their arm a little bit further as they grow. And I think that's perfect for a conference. But after they added Arkansas and South Carolina, perfect. Then they added additional A&M and Mizzou in our timeline, and then Texas and Oklahoma on top of that. Those guys never show up. Instead, they kind of stay within their footprint, double down on a couple areas. Florida State and Louisville. Then I go, well, they wouldn't do that. They're already in those states. I get it. But also, I think there's 2 states, Tennessee, 2 in Tennessee, 2 in Alabama, 2 in Mississippi. Why not 2 in Florida, 2 in Kentucky? Plus 2 very good programs. Louisville, known for basketball, football program on the rise. Florida State, known for football. Now they're kind of balancing out between all the sports. And plus, they already have rivalries in the SEC. Now they're making a conference game that gives them an extra game out of the conference. And still keep a lot of the rivalries intact. But I think with SEC, as you look at the footprint, doesn't really expand. it solidifies more. It coalesces into that area and region and really develops into it. And I think it makes perfect sense. Now for the ACC, kind of go back to its core with, Virginia, Maryland, the Carolinas, Clemson, and Georgia Tech. And then bring over from the Big East, Miami, Virginia Tech, BC, West Virginia, later on Rutgers, and Central Florida. That way, this conference is a huge setup because you're going from Chestnut Hill, outside Boston, all the way down to Miami and Coral Gables. Long stretch of universities in between there. So doing stops at Morgantown, doing stops in Atlanta, of course, the Research Triangle. And that really, just, it's the ACC footprint. Still a huge respect between the programs, but does go with the PAC. Yeah, I just call them the PAC. Kind of a generic logo. Pacific Athletic Conference is what I realized it. Got rid of the numbers. Went back to the Pac-12. Brought all those members back before the collapse. And this is under new leadership. They're not, feeling almighty thou. We don't need to expand. We're good as we are. Their inaction calls for their detraction. But so bring all them back and then bring in BYU and SMU. Once again, SMU, the outlier in this scenario. And there's not really many schools I would do. I mean, unless you kick SMU out of the power and bring in someone like Boise State, San Diego State, I think that's the only way you can do it. But I also see Texas Tech in here because they have a history with the Arizonas in the border conference before Texas Tech joined the Southwest. But Texas Tech has more in common with their members where they're at now than what they do with Arizona State. And speaking of the last power conference is the Big 14. Yep, just changed it. The normal stat point. Looked at what the Big 12 was. Right before the Big 12 broke apart, but yet they still lose Colorado, bring in TCU. Then he toss in Houston and Cincinnati. So Cincinnati is the outlier, but it's a little bit closer than Morgantown is and Orlando is. Cincinnati is definitely is an up and rising football program because I think they're the first group member to make the 14 playoff. So he had that going for him. Man, I think this actually works out because it keeps a lot of the rivalries intact that has been developed way back in the Southwest Conference, way back in the Big 8 Conference, into the Big 12. Makes Arizona, Kentucky, or anything like that. Whoever's here, I moved up, no independence. But I kicked out Buffalo and UMass out of the MAC and brought back Northern Illinois and North Dakota State. Now, North Dakota State would probably is better suited for the Mountain West in terms of, well, probably before the demise, but because some of the programs are a little bit more invested in their football program. But I just want to put them in the MAC to get the MAC somebody to really lift them back up. They're back from the time frame of Toledo, Miami, Ohio, and Bowling Green used to be atop this conference when you had Big Ben running the show for the Miami Redhawks. And then we're going to go down to the Sun Belt. Sunbelt's going through. And then we're going to go down to the Sun Belt. Sunbelt's going through a huge change. A lot of teams are getting splintered off. We still kept App State, still kept Coastal, Georgia Southern, Troy, South Alabama, Louisiana Monroe. Brought back Florida Atlantic, Florida International, Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, and welcomed in Liberty, Kennesaw State, and Jacksonville State. So the Sun Belt still keeps that tight-knit area. Virginia, Kentucky, all the way across the South, skip Mississippi, head in Louisiana. That's the Sun Belt's home footprint, and I think it really kind of makes sense for them. Now, these other two are kind of rebrands of current conferences. So Conference USA and the American are gone. They were rebranded to additional conferences to the American South and the Eastern Athletic. Now, the American South centered around Memphis, where Memphis is the key cornerstone of this conference, and a lot of the rivalries come in there. So that's UAB, that's Southern Miss, that's Arkansas State. Well, let's bring in Tulane, Tulsa, North Texas, Rice, UTSA, Louisiana Tech, Texas State, Sam Houston, Missouri State, and New Mexico State. Now, I've also used a Golf Star for this region, but because of how far stretched this conference is, I decided to rebrand it the American South. And if Tarleton makes the move up, this is where they'll go. Missouri State will leave to join the MAC. And for the Eastern Athletic, well, this is where Buffalo and UMass land. This is where UConn comes in. You bring in Army, Navy, Temple, East Carolina, Charlotte, South Florida, Delaware, Marshall, James Madison, Old Dominion, and Georgia State. Now, a lot of these programs have history going all the way back to the Yankee Conference. That's, UConn, UMass, Delaware, and James Madison. A lot of them have history in the A-10 with Temple, UMass, so as well as Colonial, or the Coastal with James Madison, or actually, the Colonial at the time frame, James Madison and Old Dominion and Georgia State. Southern with Marshall and East Carolina. So there's a lot of history with a lot of these programs. A lot of it older, some of it not. Put them all together, kind of like the East ACC. You're going from New England down to Florida to fill in the void, and I think this actually really makes sense overall for these programs. Well, that's the layout for the conferences. Well, let's go with the playoffs. And with the playoffs, I went with a 24-team format. All 10 conference champions, 14 at large, makes for a very huge bracket, and I think very fitting for a lot of aspects. You'll still have controversy. There's no way around that. Even in a men's tournament, when they have 6-8 teams, you still have people complaining about 68 and 69. Giddy. You're going to get it. There's no way about that. But looking at some of the controversy we've had with the FBS playoffs, the two major ones, and they both dealt with Alabama overstepping probably a little too much to bring them in, and that kind of mindset is really what kind of drove me to this scenario. Now, I used last year's rankings in the college football playoffs, their poll, to do the seeds in here, so everything in here kind of makes sense. You have all your conference champions. You have Indiana 1, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ole Miss, A&M, and Oklahoma all sitting there as a top 8 game. And you don't, affect the games of the conference championship, but yet they do, unless it involves Alabama. Then they don't. Well, BYU taking on ACC champ Duke. Then you have 13th ranked Texas taking on the Eastern Athletics James Madison. You have Vanderbilt who get the American South Tulane. And this is where some of the controversy kind of start to appear. You got Utah getting Virginia, and then USC taking on Arizona. Now, technically, Arizona, Michigan both outranked Virginia. But since Virginia was in the conference championship game, and you don't, affect the games of the conference championship, but yet they do, unless it involves Alabama, then they don't. 24 bowl games. This year, the Power 5 at least has 5 bids per conference. The group has 4 bids per conference. Still leaves you 3 at large. And you plug and play and correlate. That doesn't mean everyone gets in. And that's the current issue with the current bowl system, is every team that's 6-6 gets a bid. and kept some bowl games in there. Like the games in L.A. and Detroit have both been dropped after this past college football season. So new bowl games will replace them, maybe in those locations as well. Who knows? But for me, I moved a Holiday Bowl from San Diego to SoFi, put a new bowl game in San Diego, the Poinsettia Bowl, brought in the Motor City, brought back the Copper Bowl, so it's no longer the Rate Bowl, changed Duke's Mayo to the Carolina Bowl, Avengers 86 Bowls back to the Mobile Bowl, the Pop-Tarts Bowls back to the Tangerine. So things like that kind of keep some of these bowl games back to the original setup. Merged the ReliaQuest and Gasparilla into one bowl game for Tampa. And sure, locations, stadiums only had one bowl game, didn't have multiple in there. But you notice Orlando has 2 bowls. One's at Camping World, one's at UCF. And you'll see they'll have a third game, and that's for the soccer stadium. But I've also looked at the FCS Bowl postseason. They have 24 in the playoffs, but only one bowl game because both the WAC and the SWAC and the MEAC both abstain because of how their schedules are. Because their championship for the SWAC coincides with the first round of playoffs, so they do their own bowl, the Celebration Bowl, and then their programs can get invited, but a lot of times are not. And like this past year, Alabama State should have been in the playoffs, were not. This helps alleviate this problem where you'll have a total of 10 bowls for the S. And these are some of the smaller bowl games like the Boca Raton, the Idaho Bowl, New Orleans, Salute the Veterans, First Responders, the Cure Bowl, the Frisco, and then brought in the Chili and Medal of Honor Bowls. 2 bowl games have been kind of rumored. They might be coming soon. Who knows? But puts another bowl game in a very cold climate in Cincinnati. But they're playing at TQL Stadium, the home of the soccer, the MLS team. They'll fit right in. And generate bowl games that allow these conferences to send another program up to possibly, go, hey, we've done our thing. Here's this. And no, not everyone in the FCS will get a bowl game that probably might deserve one, like North Carolina Central or San Diego, who have had decent seasons, but they don't have a bowl game. But that's the nature sometimes of college athletics. Not always everyone will get a shot, but it gives you the opportunity to maybe help these programs out, give them a little extra revenue at the end of the season, really help them out, especially those in the SWAC and the MEAC that really don't get much anything else besides celebration. That program does anything good, about 9.5 times out of 10, they're left out, holding the bag for playoff positions. But there you go. That's the scenario I have in place. I've gone over transfer portal, NIL, realignment, postseason. A lot there. And a lot to digest, a lot to try to comprehend. Try to go back and re-listen to me because a lot of times I talk fast and probably mumble. And you'll probably call me, I don't know what I'm talking about. These ideas are stupid. Listen, this is just my personal opinion. In my own opinion, I think this is a good setup that allows for certain things to kind of transpire. A lot of rivalries maintain, maybe new rivalries form, rekindle old ones, change the landscape as best as possible, and still make room for the aspect of future additions to the top flight of Division I football. Because I do believe Tarleton is on its way. It's just a matter of time and figure out whom will make that jump up. But there you go. Like I said, that's my scenario. Long-winded. It took me a long time to go over this, especially with the additions to North Dakota State, and I had everything in place, and all of a sudden Sacramento State showed up. Then I started thinking about things, rearranging setups, trying to go a different direction. Let's not do less intrusive. It's like for the Big Ten, you kept Maryland Rutgers in, but switched Nebraska with Notre Dame before they had the whole West Coast. I mean, I went through all of those scenarios trying to figure out the best way to put this without disrupting things too much and still maintaining a lot of key rivalries. Note there's a lot of issues I think I've noticed with the Big Ten when it comes with Pitt and then losing their rivalry with West Virginia. You can still have that in the year. There's no reason why you shouldn't. But that kind of thing you kind of throw out there to kind of, okay, let's see what transpires from here and kind of go from there. And I kind of like this setup. I think it showcases a lot of the original hatred they had for each other, especially when these conferences first started. It really blossomed. But unfortunately, in today's market, money is the source of all evil, and it's showcased in conference realignment, and especially when dealing with certain multi-billion-dollar organizations that showcases the vast majority of sporting events. They kind of dictate how things kind of go, and they're the ones that kind of generate some of the bowl games to ensure they get more money in it, more participants, which means more money because more people view. Once again, vicious cycle. But let me know down below what you think. What tweaks would you kind of throw Kate in there? Maybe what is your scenario for your perfect setup? Will you keep to 10 or you try to shrink the conferences down to 8, make your conferences bigger? Things to kind of think about. Let's mix it up. Comments below. Let's be kind to each other. Everyone has their own opinion. Doesn't make theirs better than yours or mine. But try to have a constructive conversation. It really helps boost the algorithm. The more we interact within the comment section, it really helps get this video out to the masses. Another thing to really help out is hit that thumbs up. It really highlights the importance of this video and really gets it out there. Another thing to really help this channel is to subscribe. Now, if you subscribe, it doesn't cost you a dime. Very simple to do. You press the subscribe button, turn the bell icon, turn notification next to the next time I post any more content on my channel. Now, I'll see you next time. Chat Sports Talk.